would like to welcome everyone here on behalf of the Watershed Security Fund, partnership of the First Nations Water Caucus, the First Nations Fisheries Council, and the Real Estate Foundation of BC to our grants program webinar. My name is Jenna Duncan. I'm a senior manager with the First Nations Fisheries Council, supporting this work, and also a citizen of the Tahltan Council First Nation from Whitehorse, Yukon. Joining me today on the call, you will see our wonderful grants team. We've got Natalie Ord, Leanne Sexsmith, Praise, Sifo, Eve Hurd, and Sarah Carboni. Natalie and Leanne and myself will be presenting and then answering some questions at the end. And Praise and Eve and Sarah will be supporting some of the tech and questions pieces. We encourage participants to introduce themselves in the chat box with your name, community or organization, and your location where you're joining us from. And please let us know if there's any limitations that you have and any way that we can support. So I just wanted to take a moment, we'll just go to the next slide, to share our agenda for today's webinar. So we'll start with an overview of the Watershed Security Fund. Then we'll provide an overview of the grants program, including learnings from past intakes. And as we move into this third intake, and we'll offer some more specific insights into the grant application process. During the presentation, please feel free to put questions into the Q&A box. Our team will respond directly in the Q&A, and we've also saved some time at the end to field some of those questions live with Leanne, Natalie, and myself. And for questions that we aren't able to answer in the Q&A or via panelists, please contact us through our grants email, which is just here on the slide, and we'll get back to you by email or arrange a time to connect. Specifically, if there's any kind of really more specific questions around your grant application, we're happy to chat about that one-on-one. We are committed to learning and reflecting as the Watershed Security Fund grows and evolves, as well as kind of wanting to be as transparent as possible throughout the process. So really appreciate the opportunity to learn from your questions and experiences so we can keep making improvements. Our objectives for today are to share some updates and key takeaways with you for our past intakes, provide an overview of the program and process, offer some practical guidance for applications, respond to your questions, and gain insights to help us learn and adapt. That's kind of our intro piece. And if we move to the next slide, we'll jump right into the Watershed Security Fund overview for those that might not be as familiar with our background. So at the Watershed Security Fund, we are dedicated to safeguarding the health of British Columbia's watersheds for future generations. On March 6th of 2023, the province of BC announced an initial $100 million investment to kickstart the creation of the Watershed Security Fund, which was to be co-developed and co-governed with First Nations. That contribution is currently generating about $3 to $5 million annually to fund watershed work across the province. And this initial contribution is kind of an enduring endowment that was developed. Go to the next slide. The First Nations Water Caucus, with the First Nations Fisheries Council acting as the secretariat to the Water Caucus, and the Real Estate Foundation of BC, are honored to collaborate as partners in this inspiring, impactful, and healing work. And together we are providing the interim stewardship for the Watershed Security Fund, as well as working to co-develop a permanent entity to house the Watershed Security Fund over the long term. And this image is some of our leadership group. You can, sorry, jumping around. This image on the screen is from the Watershed Security Fund Strategic Plan, which showcases the Watershed Security Fund vision, purpose, and mandate, as well as the mission of the permanent entity and our shared values, which is beautifully illustrated by partners at Indigenous Marketing Solutions. Our vision is for a future where thriving watersheds and the natural flow of water are of the utmost importance, and water is highly valued as a sacred source of life for all living beings. By investing in projects that prioritize reconciliation, ecosystem restoration, climate resilience, and sustainable economies, we can ensure our watersheds remain healthy and vibrant for generations to come. The permanent entity, which is being established, being co-developed to hold and deliver an enduring fund over the long term, is going to be co-governed with First Nations, modeling a path forward for reconciliation and watershed health. The Watershed Security Fund strategic plan acknowledges that watershed security is a shared responsibility, requiring everyone within the watershed to actively contribute to its care and preservation. It also recognizes that our communities and ecosystems are interconnected and support a whole of watershed approach. And you can see some of our guiding values on the right of this image. To govern, our interim work partners have developed a commitment to action that provides the framework for the First Nations Water Caucus, FNFC, and REFBC to work together on the co-development, implementation, and administration of the fund. Describes the principles, oversight, and decision-making structures that support our work. The diagram on the right provides an illustration of the governance structure. It includes a joint executive with folks from each of our partners and support from the province who act in an advisory role on the joint executive. We have a number of working groups that include a mix of internal and external members. The work is ongoing, and it has been really interesting and rewarding journey as we've built relationship, trust, and ways of working together. Since the agreement was signed in March of 2023, we've initiated the planning and implementation of work in each of these areas illustrated on the screen. Our initial focus was on establishing the interim joint operations and governance, on investment planning and financial management, as well as on the grants program and communications. We're now starting to focus on all of those areas, as well as on other areas, including growing the fund, the co-development for permanent entity, and evaluation and learning. And our strategic plan highlights the Watershed Security Fund's priority areas of work and some key activities that we are taking to action these priorities if you're curious about learning more. With a lot of really amazing work underway and many projects seeking funding, growing the fund is top of mind for us. With the initial $100 million investment, as I mentioned earlier, that seeded amount of funding is currently generating an annual baseline budget of about $3 to $5 million per year. And we do recognize the big gap between the funding requests that we've received in our first two grants intakes and the amount that we're able to fund. So we're working really hard to grow our processes on how we can grow the fund through Crown government, philanthropy, and industry contributions to achieve a long-term vision of building a $1 billion fund that can sustainably support watershed work across the province at the needed scale. And I will pass it to Leanne.
Thanks, Jenna, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. It's a real honor to be able to do this work with so many people in community that are working towards shared goals. And so in this next part of the presentation, Natalie and I are going to provide an overview of the grants program and application process. Next slide. So the grants program is guided by a vision that aligns with the one that Jenna shared earlier for the fund overall. And it supports work that nourishes our waterways, upholds the strength of First Nations voices and ways of being in relation to the land and water, and weaves together enduring relationships between First Nations and non-First Nations. Through our 3 funding streams, our grants program aims to meet water stewards and champions where they are at, building partnerships and collaboration among diverse groups. And like the natural ebb and flow of our waterways, we will grow and evolve through this work and support a whole of watershed approach, with water remaining the most important environmental, cultural, economic, and spiritual wellspring we share. On this slide here, you can see some of our key program outcomes and goals. And you can also find these in the application guide on our website, along with our other program criteria. And we really encourage you to review these before applying. Overall, our intention is to fund projects that align with the fund's values while supporting the outcomes that you can see here on the left-hand side of the slide. And as a funder, we want to do this in a way that is supportive, adaptable, timely, and inspiring. We want to uphold our commitments to co-development and relationship building, and create a foundation for the future with shared insights and learnings from the important work that project teams do in community. Next slide. When the fund was first created, a key priority was to get dollars out to community as soon as possible. And this slide here shows our journey to do that over the past couple of years. We've tried to design the grants program to reflect the seasonal, cyclical nature of watershed work and allow time for reflection and adaptation. We were able to do 2 intakes in the first year because we did want to get some dollars out into community as soon as possible. But looking ahead, we anticipate a regular intake each fall, so annually, with dollars flowing each spring. It is still a new program that will continue to be refined and adapted with ongoing direction as we go. And we look forward to getting continued feedback from the Water Caucus, Joint Executive Grants Working Group, and folks in community. To uphold our values of transparency and accountability, we are doing our best to collect and share data from our intakes. This map is color-coded to reflect the extent of applications received in our first 2 intakes across the 3 funding streams. The blue dots are Stream 1 grants of up to $50,000. The gold dots are Stream 2. Actually, these are applications, I should clarify, are for Stream 2 applications up to $150,000, and the red dots are for Stream 3 applications up to $400,000. So as you can see, demand and readiness to do this work is really high, with us receiving 292 applications in our first 2 intakes. And most of those applications have been really strong. So until we can grow the fund, unfortunately, we can only support a small portion of these projects, which makes decisions really tough. Between the last 2 grants intakes, we were able to approve 54 of those 292 applications, but we also had to decline 234 projects. So not sharing these numbers to discourage applicants, but just want to provide some transparency regarding the tension between the limited available funds and the huge extent of need and readiness to do the work. But as Jenna mentioned, we are working hard with our partners to grow the fund, and we hope to be able to scale up soon, or as soon as we can grow the fund, I guess I should say. So on this slide here, you can see those 54 projects that did total 12 million in grants. We had 5 million generated from the fund and 7 million contributed from the Real Estate Foundation. We do have an interactive version of this map on our website with a description of each funded project. So please feel free to have a look at the project examples there. It's all really important, critical work, and we're grateful to be able to support these projects and look forward to more in the future. Next slide. So in designing and implementing the grants program, we're also really grateful for the guidance of a grants working group who bring deep knowledge and understanding of watershed needs and communities across BC. Information on the working group and its members is also on our website, so feel free to learn more there. But we just ask that you don't reach out to individual members about your application. The Watershed Security Fund program staff are available to answer those questions and support your application, so please reach out to them rather than the working group members. In the diagram on the right, we also just wanted to illustrate the general process for reviewing and approving grants. So each grant is initially reviewed by 2 staff, one from FNFC and one from REFBC. Based on these reviews, staff jointly do some initial analysis and generate summary reports and other supporting materials for the grants working group's consideration. The grants working group members conduct their reviews and then meet together as a group to discuss areas of alignment or difference, sharing comments, reflections, and rationale for recommended grants. And then based on this discussion, they collectively recommend a package of grants, which is then brought forward to the joint executive for approval. And with so many strong relevant projects, it's not so much about trying to choose just the best projects. There's so many good ones, but just rather about trying to support a mix of diverse initiatives across BC that reflect all the various criteria. Okay, so with the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Natalie. Natalie, you're just on mute still.
Thank you. I'm trying to do too many things at once. Just a quick note for everyone. I see that there's some questions coming in through the chat. If you can try to put those in the Q&A instead, that just makes it easier for us to keep track of them. So if we don't see your answer in the chat and it's something that you would like us to address and we don't get to it in the webinar, please feel free to just send us an email. So speaking a little bit more about the budget for this intake, our grants budget for the first 2 years came from a combination of interest earned on the fund and the additional contributions from REFBC. So as mentioned in our first intake, we were able to grant out about 5 million, in our second intake 7 million. And for this third intake, we have a baseline budget of 5 million again. So with that current budget of 5 million, we anticipate being able to fund 6 to 8 applications in stream 1, 6 to 8 applications in stream 2, and 8 to 10 applications in stream 3. The reason why there's a few more in stream 3 is because we've seen more applications come in that stream in our last 2 intakes. So there was a question in the chat around, are you more likely to fund certain streams? So hopefully this gives you a bit of a sense of what we're aiming for. Because we had to decline so many very strong projects in intakes 1 and 2 due to the high volume of applications received relative to our grants budget, in intake 3, we are prioritizing strong applications for projects that have been previously submitted and declined. So all applications will still be evaluated using the same overall criteria, but all other things being equal, projects that were previously submitted and declined due to limited funding will be prioritized over projects that are being submitted for the first time. We get quite a few questions around, whether or not the funding needs to be spent during the fiscal year or calendar year, and it doesn't. So when we talk about year 1, it's the project timeline, not the fiscal or calendar year. So if your grant is approved in April 2026, we would expect funds to be spent by April 2027. But we also recognize that sometimes things go a little bit differently than you planned. So if you need to extend that timeline or shorten that timeline, that's completely fine. Just have a conversation with us. Given our small budget relative to number of requests, it's highly unlikely that an organization that holds an active WSF grant would be funded again in this intake. When existing funding work is nearing completion or complete, contingent on the strength and success of a project, organizations can apply for another grant. So if your project, if you have a current grant and it's coming up, will be ending in January of this year, you can still apply in this intake, but we would recommend having a conversation with us or submitting your final report before applications are being reviewed. So if that's a situation you're in, if just there might be a little bit of overlap of those timelines, just let us know and we can have a conversation about that. Okay, so the guide to the grants application is available on the website. I'm going to talk a little bit on the high level about the application, but would recommend looking at the application guide for more of those details. So I'll just be highlighting some considerations for each section to provide some transparency. And if you, again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A and we will get to those shortly. So grant funding is available to support projects and initiatives that achieve actionable progress on ecosystems health and which prioritize reconciliation, healthy communities, climate resilience, and sustainable economies in any of these areas of watershed-based work. These funds are focused on freshwater, so marine projects are not a focus of this funding, though we do acknowledge that there can be some overlap between the two. So estuaries, for example, would be accepted, but it's expected that projects demonstrate freshwater connections. These funding themes are not used as assessment criteria when reviewing grant applications. We do ask applicants to determine their top 2 themes that their project fits into to help us better understand and communicate what type of work is being done. We recognize the holistic interwoven aspects of watershed work and understand that most projects will connect across several themes. So one of the core principles for the grants program is that we recognize that First Nations title, rights, and sovereignty are crucial to the health and sustainability of lands and waters. So as part of this work, we do ask applicants to indicate their organizational relationship to First Nations, and we're using a matrix developed by the Circle called the I4DM to help us do that. You'll see that reference in the application form, as long as along with some guidance on how to use the matrix to help you self-identify your organization. We are taking a developmental approach with the 3 funding streams to support a range of project sizes at different stages. We hope this can enable some funding for organizations and projects well on their way with a foundation of prior work, and also offer resources to others at earlier stages of project conception, design, research, or relationship building. Across those 3 funding streams, at higher levels of funding, there will be a prioritization of projects led by organizations who are generally further along the continuum towards First Nations-led or partnered work. Right now, we have these general guidelines rather than specific funding targets and percentages. So our overall goal is to center First Nations while also making space for resourcing the important work of non-First Nations-led initiatives that contribute to holistic, collaborative, and shared ways forward for addressing watersheds needs. We are currently considering 1 application per organization per intake in one of each of these funding streams. So it is preferred that applications come directly from community-connected organizations themselves. And ideally organizations within a community could seek ways to collaborate and coordinate their efforts. So if a community does not have capacity to apply for a grant themselves, they can reach out to us. And we have a way of supporting that I'll talk a little bit more about shortly. So advancing UNDRIP is an overarching priority for the fund. We use a framework developed by Tara Marsden and ask questions in the grant application that help us understand how UNDRIP is being advanced through projects led both by First Nations and non-First Nations. We also consider many dimensions of a project proposal in the review and decision-making process. So in addition to UNDRIP, we look at 5 other assessment criteria here that are grounded in prior learnings and the principles and values that underpin the grants program and the fund. The guide goes into more detail about each of these areas and why they're important, and we strongly encourage applicants to elaborate on how their project addresses these aspects. Depending on the scale and nature of the project work, whether it's, just getting started or is further along, some projects may address 1 or 2 of these areas and others may address them all. So don't be worried if your project doesn't address all of them, but where it is relevant, we would love to see some more information. Project partnerships might also be relevant to your project. So partnerships can be an indicator of collaboration and community connection or an organization's relationship to First Nations. We don't evaluate proposals based on the number of partners. We're much more interested in the quality of those partnerships. There is a section to describe your partner's role, so whether they're a full partner or if it's an information-only type of situation. We used to ask for that information just for partnerships with First Nations, but for this intake, we're asking this question for all types of partners as it helps us understand the nature of the relationship better. So if you've submitted an application in the past, you'll notice that this is a small change from previous applications. We do also understand that it can be challenging to get letters of support from busy partners. Letters of support are not required, but if your project involves a partnership and relationship with First Nations, there should be a number of ways to demonstrate that don't burden the nations who are often fielding many such requests. So that can look like emails or MOUs, or maybe you have a letter of support for another grant application that you submitted that you want to use for this one. And that's all fine. If you have questions about that, you can let us know. If you've indicated you are working in partnership with the First Nation, we'll be looking for meaningful evidence of that. And on to budget. So the section 6 asks for budget information. For projects in Stream 1, we only ask for a summary description of how WS funds would be used for project expenses. For projects in Stream 2 and 3, there is a budget form on our website that we ask you to download and complete as part of your application. While contracted consultants may be engaged for specific roles, the fund is particularly interested in proposals that create or sustain community-based positions, roles, and project resources. So we encourage budgets that support elders, youth, and ceremony, and sharing the story of project work. We don't require matching funding to apply for a grant. We're totally fine being the only funder. And we also recognize that for larger projects, there will be other sources of funding. So those are not required, but can be good to see for projects in Stream 3 or of interest in Stream 2, sorry. Generally speaking, the budget should tell the same story as the narrative part of your application, and that's one thing we'll be looking at when we review applications. So, for example, if the application talks a lot about community engagement, but we don't see any budget line items related to community engagement, we're going to be a little bit confused. There may be other sources of funding that will be supporting that work, and it's just helpful for us to know about that. So you can add maybe a note in your budget or in the narrative part of your application if you're describing the project as a whole, and then add a sentence saying like these funds in particular will support X, Y, Z, just to be clear that the budget maybe is just telling a part of the story that the narrative maybe tells a little bit more of. As part of project reporting, we will also be interested in learning about other sources of funding across any of the streams, and that helps us to see how these resources are being leveraged or complemented, and to understand and share insights about the funding landscape for the watershed sector. So again, whoops, not advancing my slides. There we go. So this is the budget form for Stream 2 and 3 applications, and that is available to download from the grants page of our website. So it includes several categories of expenses which may be relevant to your project, and there are some explanatory notes and examples of expenses on the form to provide guidance. Even if you're applying for a Stream 1 project and you don't need to download this and fill it out, it could be helpful to look at just to get a sense of the types of expenses and a little bit more information about that. If you reach out to us at the grants email well in advance of the deadline, there might be other options such as submitting a budget form that you've previously prepared for another funding program in lieu of our budget template. We would just ask that you do that ahead of the deadline so we can jointly ensure it provides the information we need to receive and review your budget information. There's also the application allows for other attachments as well as the budget form to be uploaded. So those could be providing evidence of the depth of partnerships or any other supplementary documents. If you are applying via the online form, there's a place to attach that, or if you're sending it to us by email, you can just include those in the email. Speaking of ways to apply, there are a couple different ways to submit your application. First is the online portal. So if that is available to you, that is the preferred way for applications to be submitted, and that can be accessed through a link on the grants website page. You will have the ability to save your application and resume at any point through the online portal, so don't worry that you have to fill it out all in one go. We also do accept Word documents. So if you're in an area without reliable access to internet, you can download the Word document, fill that out, and then just email it to us at the grants@watershedsecurityfund.ca. Once you submit in that way, you'll receive confirmation that we've received it within a week. So basically, we take the Word document and then copy and paste the sections into the online way through the portal. So there can be a little bit of delay just depending on how many applications we're receiving. But if you don't hear from us after a week, please reach out to us again just to ensure that we've received it. We also offer conversations through Zoom, Teams, phone call. And again, let us know in advance if that's something you've needed, ideally before November 6th, as there can be a little bit of back and forth that goes there. That's essentially an option for organizations who do not have capacity to apply for the grants program themselves and need additional support. So through a conversation, it's essentially like submitting a verbal application. So we'll take notes and type things up as you talk, send it back to you and make sure it all looks good. There might be a bit of back and forth. So again, just giving us a heads up if you want this option is preferred, so we can make sure that we schedule that well in advance. We've also, for this intake, a new thing is that we've created a process to make it easier for applicants to resubmit their application. So essentially just send us an email and we'll send you a link, a customized link that kind of sends your application back to you. So whatever was submitted in the previous intake, and then you can edit it if you need to, and then click resubmit. So rather than starting from scratch, this hopefully makes it a little bit easier to reapply. And yeah, if you have any questions, just reach out to us. I usually say it's easier for us to sort things out before the intake deadline than afterwards. So if there's anything you're unsure about, just let us know, send us an email. Either we can respond by email or set up a call. I noticed that there is a question in the chat around, will this be shared? So most of the information that is in this is in the application guide, which is already on the website, and we can share this one as well. This is also being recorded, and we will be putting that on the website as well. Not immediately, because we'll want to edit out the beginning of it, but this will be available on the website too. So thank you. Thanks for your time. And we are now going to open it up for any questions that folks might have.
Yeah, we've received a lot of really good questions, so I'll just get right into it. Maybe Natalie can answer this one. So it says, you mentioned that strong projects that were submitted and not funded in the past would be prioritized over new projects. So does it make sense to resubmit the exact same proposal again, or if small changes are made, would a project still be considered as a past submission? And then a related question that maybe you can add on to that is there a separate submission process?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we recognize that if you submitted a year ago and you want to submit for the same project, there will likely have been changes, which is why we give you the option to edit the proposal. If it's essentially the same project, but has maybe moved along in the kind of implementation of the project, that's fine. I would still consider that to be the same project and to be a resubmission. If you have questions about that, just send us an email. Maybe we could talk more specifically about what your project is and kind of what's happened since you last submitted. The separate process would be to get that link from us to reapply. So it's the same application, it's just will make it a bit easier for you because the all of your answers that you submitted previously will be there for you. And again, you can update those and just click to resubmit. So that helps. Well, hopefully is helpful on your end because you're not starting from scratch. And then in our system, we'll see that it's a resubmission for a project. So it's easier for our tracking as well.
Great. Maybe Jenna can answer this next one. Can you rank the streams by most to least number of applicants or provide the percentage of applicants by stream? This could create a bit more transparency.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. I see that Megan's popped some or might be to the hosts and panelists, so I might need to pop that in. But in the past couple intakes, we've definitely had a lot more submissions into stream 3 than we have into stream 1 and 2. So it's been fewer amount of applications in stream 1 versus, and then a few more into stream 2, and then a significant portion more into the stream 3 category. Hopefully that's helpful just on how many submissions we're receiving.
And then I guess Leanne can answer this next one. It says, question in the grant application is on project activities support the exercise of Indigenous rights, and this includes land-based activities that support cultural and rights-based activities by First Nations peoples. What can be included as land-based activities?
Thanks. Great question. That would be quite a wide range of activities, but I can put out just a few examples top of mind, and then feel free to reach out to the program staff if you have a more specific example that you want to get some feedback on. But mapping and archaeological work might be one kind of land-based activity where the project team is documenting past and current activity on the land or ancestral practices. There could be restoration work that is supporting food systems or plants or animals that have some spiritual significance or cultural significance, medicines, and that sort of thing. Oh my gosh, there's so many. Jenna and Natalie, feel free to expand on these examples, but any kind of work that supports governance and decision-making over land would be another example. Yeah. Cultural practices, land-based cultural practices and learning could be another one. But yeah, Natalie, Jenna, anything to add?
Awesome. So next question I'll give to Natalie again. This one is for a new organization applying for the first time. Is it preferred to apply for the smaller streams, especially for projects that have growth plans?
Yeah, that depends. I'm not quite sure what you mean by growth plans, but each of the stream, there's some guidance on the types of projects that we'd expect to see in those streams. So stream 1 is kind of more project in development. So maybe you're still forming your partnerships. Maybe there's some research or data analysis that needs to be done to determine your direction going forward. It's really intended for kind of early stage. You need a bit of funding to get things going. Stream 2 is kind of the project is happening. It might be a smaller scale restoration project, for example, or maybe it's like a pilot project or something that's just starting out, and maybe, you know, things are developed enough that work is underway, but there's still some development needed to happen. And in stream 3, those are the projects that we're kind of expected to see everything good to go. Like all your partnerships should be in place. You should know exactly what you're doing. Those are the ones that we would expect like could just hit the ground running and not need to be kind of still figuring things out. If you're still figuring things out, it'd be more of a stream 2 project. So hopefully that helps answer that question. And in terms of it being a newer, like we're not really looking to see if like this is a new applicant. We recognize that even if it's a new applicant to the Watershed Security Fund, you may have been doing this work for decades. And so as a quote unquote new applicant, you could still apply for a Stream 3 grant if that's what makes sense for your project. So it's less about your relationship with us as a funder and more about where your project is. And if you're not entirely sure, or you're trying to decide between two, I'd recommend letting us know and we can have a conversation specifically about your project.
Great. Jenna, maybe you can do this one. So it says regranting of funds to contractors to implement water quality projects was an eligible expense in the last intake. Could you confirm this is still the case?
Yeah. Yeah, we acknowledge that there can be limited capacity within communities or organizations, and that having contractors to support some different pieces of the initiative is often needed. So it is still an eligible expense. We really like to see and support kind of building capacity within communities, but understand that there can be limitations in that process, especially as initiatives are getting off the ground, or with many initiatives going on, and things like that. So yep, it's still there. I don't know if Leanne or Natalie, if you had anything else you wanted to add to that.
Great. Okay, this next one for Leanne. Can you resubmit a project but for a different stream?
You can resubmit a project. And I'm guessing you're talking about you applied previously, it wasn't funded, and you're just wondering if you can resubmit with some adaptations so that and have it fit in a different stream. And that is totally fine, I think, especially because as time passes, people's projects evolve. So, you may have applied a year ago and now things are moving along in your community and the original project is slightly different. So that's totally fine, no problem at all. Assuming that I'm interpreting the question correctly.
Okay, wonderful. And then back to Natalie. If an organization makes an application, can they also be involved as a partner in an application made by another organization? For example, if a First Nation makes an application, can they also be involved as a funded partner in an application made by another organization?
Yes, although funded partner is throwing me off a little bit. So short answer, yes, you can apply for a grant and be a partner on another grant. Where there is a bit of nuance, might be where the money is going. So if you're applying for a grant and then there's another grant being submitted, but most of the funding is going to you from that project, that would kind of look like two grants for you. So I would say in that case, if that's a situation, maybe have a conversation with us. Again, just because of limited funding, and we're trying to have a bit of geographic equity in the grants, so trying not to concentrate most of the funding in one geographic area. And so geography is something that we're looking at when we are making grant recommendations. Thanks to our colleague Megan, we do use the images of maps that you saw earlier. We do pull those up in the meeting so we can kind of see where things are landing. And so if it's a partnership, but through those two grants, the money is really going to one organization or one nation, that would it would be unlikely that both would be funded. I'd put it that way. So if that's your situation that you're in, again, probably be best to talk with us about it. I'm hoping that that is answering what the question was.
Great. Jenna, if our application from last year was not approved, are we allowed to submit a new application this year for a completely different project? If yes, would this new application still be considered fairly and possibly receive priority, since we have already shown previous interest in the program?
Thanks, Sarah. It's a really interesting and great question. Yes, you can apply with a new application. and all applications will be considered fairly and equally against one another. We definitely understand that priorities can change from year to year or based on funding. Around that, I might need to pass to Natalie for the last bit there around the prioritization piece.
Yeah, so that's a tricky one. The intention of the prioritization piece, and when we talked with the grants working group about it, it was specifically about like projects, not organizations. And that was recognizing that there were a number of projects in which that were declined. And in our decline conversations with them, all we could really say was, this is a really strong project. We have no feedback for you. We have no recommendations of what you can change to make it stronger because it's already really strong, but we don't have the funding and we can't fund it. And that's really frustrating for folks to hear, understandably. And so the goal with the reprioritization was to, or sorry, not reprioritization, with the prioritization was to acknowledge that there are these really strong projects that we have not been able to fund. And if they're applying again, or resubmitted again, that we would want to prioritize them in recognition of the frustration of, you know, being told that your project is really strong, but that we can't fund it. So because of that, the language on the website and what we had in agreement with the grants working group was project specific, not organization specific. However, that might be something that we could talk about a little bit further. I don't know, Leanne, if you have any other thoughts, or if Jenna, you and Leanne, if that aligns with what your thoughts were on that. But if whoever is asking this question wants to have more of a conversation about, you know, the specific circumstances of their project, because like Leanne was saying, we recognize, like, we don't want you applying for a grant for a project that, you know, is no longer important or has been funded through something else. Like, that doesn't make sense either. We do want you to be able to submit applications that is for the work that is most pertinent and relevant to your community. So that might be something we need to discuss a little bit further, but the intention of it was to recognize those specific projects.
Great. Jenna, our organization is a non-First Nations-led organization, and we would like to better understand UNDRIP and how we can build understanding and relationships with First Nations in BC. Do you have any advice or resources?
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. Really great question, and really grateful for putting that out there and seeing that. We have a couple of different resources I think that we've highlighted in our grants framework around UNDRIP and also around some of the work that the Circle of Philanthropy's done, as well as some work that Tara Marsden has done with the Real Estate Foundation BC, and maybe we can pop a link. I think that that's a publicly, Leanne can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So would recommend having a look through that, and we're happy to arrange a call as well if you want to reach out through the grants, and we can kind of chat through some other different ways and resources and connections that we might have to support that.
I'll maybe just add a couple of things. As Jenna mentioned, there's some links and resources in the grants program FAQs on our website. And some of those resources are available through the REFBC website. You can find some webinar recordings on UNDRIP and you. What does UNDRIP mean for your organization? There's also a resource for local governments called Aligning Local Climate Action with UNDRIP. And through the Healthy Watersheds Initiative project, there's a lot of resources and examples on that website. So there is a report specific to our assessment of how we did in actioning UNDRIP. There's some UNDRIP posters that give examples of how watershed work can address specific UNDRIP articles. And then there was a series of workshops held with Nahanni Creative with the Healthy Watersheds project teams. And there's some final reports and resources available from those workshops as well. And then the Healthy Watersheds Initiative report itself also has some sections on UNDRIP and some really good insights shared from non-Indigenous project teams on how they upheld and meaningfully implemented UNDRIP in their project work. So hopefully there's some good resources and examples for folks there.
Wonderful. And I'll ask this one to Leanne. What will the reporting structure for WSF be? Will it be after 6 months or a year? How much detail will we be expected to provide in project reporting?
Yeah, that's a great question, and nice for folks to have a sense of that going into a funding relationship. So we do have Word versions of our reporting forms available on our website. So you can have a look and see what some of the questions are for interim reporting and final reporting. Our reporting schedule is generally, if your project is about a year long or just over a year, we just expect one final report. If it's a multi-year project over 2 or more years, then after the first year, we would look for an interim report, and then each year after until you reach the end of the project, and then we're just looking for a final report. And we've tried to strike a balance based on best practices, learnings, and insights from past funding programs and work that we've done around, we do want to share really meaningful insights from this work and really lift up the stories of the work. So there's some qualitative questions about that where we'll really try to share that out in community in ways that support your work and the work of the watershed community overall. And then also we are collecting some data because it can be powerful in demonstrating the impact of the work, but trying not to make that too onerous. So we did put a fair bit of thought into the questions. In some past work like the Healthy Watersheds Initiative, there was a lot of quantitative questions because that was a requirement under the funding envelope, but this time around we have a bit more flexibility. So there's some of that, but it's not too comprehensive. And we do welcome feedback from folks on our reporting, both interim and final. So yeah, just really encourage and welcome you to let us know if you think it's achieving the right balance and if it's serving your needs too. That's an important goal. Reporting is really to help us all understand the challenges and the impacts and the good learning that comes from this work. So it's really based on a learning and evaluation model. Anything to add, Natalie and Jenna, on that?
I think we have time for one more question, if that works for you guys. And I have this one for Jenna. It says, what is the process for the First Nations Water Caucus and working groups been selected and resourced to participate? How are new members identified for potential support?
Yeah, thank you. The First Nations Water Caucus is made up of regional and technical delegates from across BC, and working group members are comprised of a range of diverse leaders with experience and connection to regional watersheds across BC, and who have various experience with the different areas of work. And resourcing primarily comes from the work for the Water Caucus through this and work with the Watershed Security Fund and through our work with the Province of the Water Table. I can pop my email in the chat as well if I haven't answered that clearly, and if there's more questions or more clarity needed around that, I'd be more than happy to to answer any of those and to dive a bit deeper into it. So I'll, oh, great. Sarah's popped my email in the chat and happy to connect on that. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Sarah, for leading us through the Q&As, and thank you to everyone for your time and for joining us here today. It's yeah, real pleasure that everyone was able to make it and to ask some questions. And please reach out to us if there's any further questions that folks have. We're happy to set up time to chat through any further questions, or if you kind of want to chat through some questions specifically about your application, or if there was anything that we didn't answer today or didn't quite provide enough information, then please reach out to us and be happy to chat further. So thank you so much for joining us, and wishing everyone a lovely afternoon. I don't know, Natalie or Leanne, if you had anything else to add.
I just popping something in the chat, Jenna, because I did just want to acknowledge that as a non-Indigenous organization, REFBC's done a lot of its own learning on how we can meaningfully advance UNDRIP. And Tara Marsden, our UNDRIP fellow, who was also integral to the Healthy Watersheds Initiative, has been so instrumental in that. And we have something called the TAWA, provided a link to it there. We are releasing our first year progress report on that in the next couple of months. So that'll also be on our website, and just hope that it's a good way of sharing our learning journey in this important work as well. And really thanks to all of you for the work that you do in community, again, to support shared goals. So great, thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.